Last week I covered one big number, 55 million foreigners with U.S. visas and what that means to you. This week I have three new numbers. Like I said, I'm not really trying to report only on this. It's just stuff that keeps popping up that's of interest to me, and I thought it would be of interest to you. The three big numbers that I'm going to cover this week are $30,000 a day bribes, 600,000 students from the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and 40 million illegal aliens. So let's start off with the $30,000 daily bribes. Walmart, a technical vice president, took $30,000 daily kickbacks to boot Americans and hire H-1B workers. And as we read further, it says at least 30,000. What I like here is it says by Charlie Kirk, let's end the H-1B scam. The time is now. Congress needs to get a bill to the president's desk. And that was August. That was this month. When Charlie Kirk speaks, the president listens. He has the ear of the president. The president has shown up to his Turning Point USA Political Action Committee conferences, which is on par these days, at least with CPAC. CPAC has been around a long time, and Charlie Kirk, to have a conference that's on par with that is rather impressive. I don't think he's quite 35 years old yet. And the man is a household name within the MAGA movement, so I'm glad he's speaking out. But the crux of the story is here, and I'm highlighting in red. It says over a single weekend in August, 1,200 technology contractors found themselves locked out of their systems, their access badges deactivated, their projects suspended indefinitely. The mass termination wasn't the result of budget cuts or strategic pivots. It was the fallout from a corruption scheme that reached into the highest echelons of Walmart's global tech division. The retail giant's abrupt severance of ties with Caspex-sourced contractors followed the firing of a global tech vice president who had been orchestrating an elaborate kickback operation. Daily payments starting from $30,000 flowed from contracting agencies seeking preferential treatment in Walmart's vast technology ecosystem, sources familiar with the investigation revealed. I noticed this. Daily payments starting from $30,000 flowed from contracting agencies seeking preferential treatment in Walmart's vast technology ecosystem. So it's at least 30,000 in bribes. And this person got arrested. 1,200 contractors found themselves immediately out of work because these folks can't practice morality and use the H-1B system for what it was intended, which is rare usage when nobody in America can do a particular job. And when you have a bench of hundreds of millions of Americans who are the descendants of folks who were first in flight. We did not invent the automobile, but we made it mass produced so that the average American or the average person across the world could afford an automobile. We not first in space, but first on the moon. And even if you think we faked it, okay, who faked it better than us? Who's come close to faking a moon landing as well as the Americans? We used to make very, very good furniture. President Trump talks about how for his hotels, he used to go to North Carolina, High Point, North Carolina, and get all of his furnishings from there because of the good quality. We need to get back to that kind of stuff. And it's not going to happen, especially in the tech sector, when we start creating an environment that says that Americans just can't do it as well. When you think IT, think Asian, think Chinese, think Asian Indian. That's wrong. Think American. I have a toaster oven that was handed down to me by my grandmother. And even though it was a hand-me-down, it lasted me another 30 years before I had to think about a replacement. And I bought something online from Amazon that was likely made in China. It took up more space on my countertop, and it didn't have as much space on the inside of the actual toaster oven. Took up more counter space, didn't have as much space inside, and guess what? It didn't even make toast that well. So I returned it, and in desperation, I went to eBay to see if I could find something similar to what my grandmother passed down to me, and there were several there, so I bought a replacement from someone on eBay. Used, cleaned it up, and it works fine. And the reason it does is because when you look at the bottom of it, it says General Electric, made in USA. We got to get back to that. So that's one number, $30,000 a day bribes at Walmart. Think about that when you go shop there next. If you go shop there next. Here's another thing. The 600,000 Chinese students.
An issue, Mr. Secretary, for, I think, the base of the Republican Party, certainly for the Ingram angle for many, many years, conservatives, is this idea of foreign students coming to the United States and taking spots that would normally be, obviously open to American students. The president addressed this issue as part of the Chinese trade deal, which might be in the offing. Watch.
We're going to get along good with China. I hear so many stories about we're not going to allow their students. We're going to allow their students to come in. We're going to allow, it's very important, 600,000 students. It's very important.
Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, how is allowing 600,000 students from the communist country of China putting America first?
Well, the president's point of view is that what would happen if you didn't have those 600,000 students is that you'd empty them from the top, all the students would go up to better schools, and the bottom 15% of universities and colleges would go out of business in America. So his view is he's taking a rational economic view, which is classic Donald Trump, looking at higher education and saying,
but why are you
until we
Harvard?
modify that.
Sorry, Howard, that is wrong. I don't know if it's inaccurate, but if it is accurate, that's not a very good argument. If you'd come out and said, look, the president is working a trade deal, the benefits of the trade deal with China will greatly outweigh the detriment of 600,000 students, maybe throw in some statistics and say there's 1,000 universities and that means about 600, it's going to be what percentage, a small percentage, blah, 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 blah. I don't care, right? But at least come out and say, hey, we're going to benefit from this. Don't come out and say, well, the bottom 15% of colleges are going to be lost because, Chinese students are going to account for the top 15%, and then, everybody else is going to move up to better colleges. It's like, sorry, this is the stupidest argument I've heard from this administration. Literally. Okay, I've heard some bad arguments about certain things, including from Howard Lutnick. This is the worst. This is not a good excuse. There's no good reasoning for this. Unless, again, if this is part of some 4D chess trade deal where it's like, okay, we'll allow the Chinese students in here in exchange for a commitment of $500 billion or $5 trillion or whatever from China. Okay, fine. Well, at least we have something to argue about. There's no argument here. There's no way that you can convince me that we have to somehow save higher education in the United States of America by importing students? No, you help American students. And if there's not enough American students to fill the spots of these colleges, then yeah, they shrink. Okay, or they go out of business, as he said. Fine. I don't care. I'm sorry, but I just don't. It's not worth it. 600,000 members of the Chinese Communist Party, because for those who don't know, the Chinese Communist Party only picks the best and the brightest. So the 600,000 they send here are going to be communists. It's not going to be like pro-America Chinese Americans. And I know many of those people. I myself am a legal immigrant. Don't try to convince me that, this is going to be somehow good for America because it's good for the higher education system, which is, by the way, very much broken already. Bad argument. Poor decision, I think, in my humble opinion. And again, if there's some kind of 4D chess in the background, they need to come out and at least declare, hey, just trust us on this, this is for the trade deal. Otherwise, even then, it's not a great argument, but it's better than saying, we got to save higher education by importing Chinese students so they can take up the top spots.
I couldn't agree more, but I'll add something to that. Howard Lutnick is the Secretary of Commerce. He's also the founder of Cantor Fitzgerald. It was the company that suffered the most deaths when planes struck the World Trade Centers on September 11, 2001. and maybe coming from Manhattan like the president himself, coming from NYC, New York City, an area that has a lot of immigrants, they tend to be maybe soft on the legal immigrant side, the whole visa side. I notice, I started asking myself, why does President Trump seem to be weaker when it comes to the visa folks than he is with the illegal aliens? And I think the only answer I can come up with is whenever he speaks about illegal aliens, he doesn't speak about them from the perspective of them taking American jobs. He seems to speak more about them from the perspective of the criminal element that they bring to America, the burden that they put on law enforcement, the deaths that are caused by them. He would bring up Kate Steinle's name, other names that of people who have been killed by folks who shouldn't have been here in the first place. He doesn't seem to see that same type of criminal element or death associated with folks who have visas, and so maybe that's why he's soft on it. Plus, he comes from a high immigrant area of New York City, Manhattan. But the thing I wanted to add to this particular story is, if you notice, Howard Lutnick said, what's going to happen if the students don't come, the 600,000 students don't come? Other folks will rise up to take those spots at the Ivy Leagues. And the bottom 15% of colleges will not have enough students to help them survive, and they'll go out of business. Well, the underlying thing that he's saying there is that there aren't enough Americans who are actually qualified to take the slots at these Ivy League schools. So we have to import people who are smart enough to fill those slots. That is insulting. That is insulting if you're from an administration that's supposed to be America first. If you believe that America is good, that Americans make the best things, how do we have the best military if we got the dumbest people? If we don't have people who are good enough? So that's what I noticed. He indirectly is saying that we don't have the right stuff to fill the slots legitimately at these Ivy League schools, so we have to import in enough folks to fill those slots. And we would be doing so with a president who thinks that once they graduate, they should have a green card stamped to their diplomas. They're off base on that. Well, the third number I wanted to cover is by the vice president. The 40 million is the number there. So we went from 30,000 a day bribes at Walmart, 600,000 students from the Chinese Communist Party, and now we're going to talk about 40 million illegals. And then we'll finish up.
Why did housing get so unaffordable for American citizens? Two big problems. Number one, I already talked about, interest rates were too high. Number two, you had way too many people in this country who were competing against American citizens for scarce homes, and that's the illegal immigration problem. Why has housing leveled off over the past 6 months? I really believe the main driver is you've had negative net migration into the United States for the first time in 60 years in this country. You cannot flood the United States of America with 20, 30, 40 million people who have no legal right to be here, have them compete against young American families for homes and not expect the price to skyrocket. It's as simple as supply and demand. You increase the demand, you're going to increase the price.
All right, so that's interesting how he said 20, 30, 40 million folks illegally. That's the first time I'm hearing somebody from the White House give a number that high. And when you combine 20, 30, 40 million folks who are here illegally with the 55 million I mentioned last week who are here as foreigners on U.S. visas, and I recognize visas are not, they're technically legal, but that includes spousal visas, travel visas, student visas, and worker visas. So 4 main types. But we're talking potentially 95 million people who are foreign born competing with Americans. 95 million, and that gets closer to, I hypothesize, as many as 1 out of 3 people are here foreign born. But I was thinking it was more like 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5. And I said as much possibly as 1 out of 3. Well, this brings it a lot closer to 1 out of 3 if we're talking 95 million, 55 on visas, 40 million here illegally. And let's not forget the visa pool. The visa candidates end up becoming a pool of people who are also here illegally, because about 40% of the people who are here illegally, they overstayed their visas. This is a problem, and perhaps it didn't get to be as big a problem when it was just blue-collar workers, but you're affecting white-collar folks, and they, especially tech folks, they're tech-savvy, they have decent IQs, and they recognize what's happening. They're like, hey, how come I can't have the lifestyle that my parents had? And it's looking harder for my own kids to have the lifestyle that I grew up with. There's a problem here, and what's the problem? They're going to start to make connections. And if they're not, that's why I'm doing it. Because I get the feeling that a lot of people who feel the way I do are less melanated, and they're afraid of being called racist. Well, bring it. I'm talking about it. And I can do so without making race an issue. I'm doing it from the perspective of America first. And I will choose not some co-ethnic brethren from another country. I will choose a less melanated brethren because we're both citizens. I'll choose them first over someone who looks like me, but they just happen to be from another country. But when you start having a lot of folks here and they're in a position of power of hiring, do they really need to have a network? Do they really need to post jobs? Somebody in the comments said, these folks, they don't really have to post these jobs. That's not necessarily true. In fact, I thought I showed how with jobs.now, that was a website where people are recognizing technically jobs for H-1B candidates have to be advertised publicly, and they're being advertised in obscure publications. Folks are finding out what these obscure publications are, and they're taking the listing and then they're putting them online at jobs.now. But the commenter to my video also had a point in that, hey, do they even really need to have things advertised? When you have folks in positions of power to make hiring decisions, you don't need to really advertise. Technically, the federal government has to advertise all of their jobs for a certain period to the public before making a decision. But the dirty secret is they likely already have somebody in mind before they even make it public. I know someone who had an opportunity for a very high level federal job. They didn't want to go through the trouble of applying. And this is above the GS level. Above the GS levels. Above GS 15. I forgot what they call those different types of positions, but he didn't want to go through the paperwork to do so. But the people who wanted him in that position said, don't worry about it. We'll do it for you if you're interested. Same thing happens, I imagine, with the whole H-1B thing. And we see in my first story here how someone is being paid $30,000 a day at least to give preferential treatment to the H-1B candidate over the citizens. I know someone I worked with at my last job who told me he worked at a place where he couldn't understand why there were so many folks who didn't cut the mustard, who didn't meet the bare minimum standards to work there. And he had a hint of what the reason was when someone was approaching him with a similar deal, saying, hey, we will pay you a percentage of this person's first year salary indefinitely if you show preferential treatment and you choose them. The interesting thing is I know this guy and I know his character, and they obviously didn't do their homework to find out, is this the kind of right person that we should even be approaching with something this underhanded? Because he's not the guy. he's not the guy, and yet they took a chance. He didn't say yes, but clearly some other people before him did, and probably some people after him did. Got to stop it. Got to stop it. And that's why I'm speaking about it, because I'm a different tone of skin, different skin tone, a different skin color, talking about this. I don't know too many other black people in tech talking about this. I know some Caucasian brethren talk about it, but maybe in hushed tones. I don't have the big audience. I don't think it's because I'm talking about this that I don't have a big audience. Maybe, but I'm going to do it anyway. And maybe it'll lead to somebody who has a bigger audience. I mean, Charlie Kirk has a huge audience, and he's talking about it, and it doesn't seem to be affecting his reach. But maybe I'm just a regular everyday guy, and they don't need enough regular everyday guys making this kind of noise. We expect it from Charlie Kirk. We don't expect it from Mr. Anonymous, Tory Woodhouse, to be ringing the same bell. But I'm ringing it. I'm going to keep talking about it because I can't help it. Every week there's something new about this particular topic, and I see it as a big problem. Again, like I said, if the trucker can't have a good life in America, the nurse, the techie, the person who makes furniture, the guys who, before all this illegal immigration, who were putting up roofs, who were car mechanics, who worked at car washes, who worked at restaurants, the cooks. If we can't get back to America first, and this, with a president that talks about this a lot, if we can't do it with this guy, it's over. You know, we can have the 250th celebration and barely make it over 250, but like I said, most empires do not survive past 250 years, and we're starting to look a whole lot like our age. We're starting to look our age. I don't want it to happen. And I don't even have posterity. I'm not a father. I don't have children. It's just me. But I still know the America that I want to live in. And I know other people want that same thing. It just makes sense. Anyway, that's what I have for this week. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.